Podcasts. TNA co-founder Jeff Jarrett went on his podcast this week and said something that stopped a lot of people cold. He said if a reported clause in the WWE TNA deal is real, quote, the writing is on the wall and it's in super glue. Today, we're breaking down exactly what that clause is, why Jarrett is sounding the alarm, and what WWE's own history with similar deals tells us about where TNA might actually be headed. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the mechanics of a right of first refusal clause, the precedents that make it so significant, and the real stakes for TNA's independence. My co-host has been deep in the weeds on this one, so let's get into it. What exactly is going on here?
So the short version is this. There are reports that buried inside the WWE TNA partnership agreement is a clause that gives WWE the right of first refusal over any potential sale of TNA. What that means in plain terms is, if another company comes along and makes an offer to buy TNA, WWE gets to see that offer and match it before the deal can go anywhere else.
So WWE essentially has a veto on who gets to buy TNA.
Exactly. And that's what's making people in the wrestling world sit up and pay attention. Because on the surface, the WWE TNA partnership has looked like a pretty good deal for both sides. But this clause, if it's real, changes the entire power dynamic.
Right, and let's give some context here because the partnership itself has been genuinely significant. This wasn't just a handshake deal.
Not at all. The partnership was officially announced on January 16, 2025, and it created these cross-promotional opportunities that the wrestling world hadn't really seen before. NXT superstars were winning TNA championships, the Hardy Boys came back and captured the NXT Tag Team Championship, and the biggest moment was probably Joe Hendry. He appeared at the 2025 Royal Rumble and later worked a match against Randy Orton at WrestleMania 41.
Joe Hendry at WrestleMania. That's not a small thing.
No, it's massive. And TNA also landed a broadcast deal with AMC, which started airing their weekly episodes in January 2026. So from the outside, TNA looked like it was on an upswing. According to a report from Bodyslam.net, the partnership was even extended and is expected to run until at least 2028.
So everything looks great on paper, but then this clause surfaces and suddenly the whole picture looks different.
That's exactly the tension. And this is where Jeff Jarrett comes in. He addressed all of this on his My World podcast, and he was pretty candid that he can't even confirm for certain whether the clause actually exists. But he said, and I'm quoting here, if it's there, then the writing is on the wall and it's in super glue.
Super glue? That's a very specific kind of permanent.
It really is. And what Jarrett was getting at is that the clause doesn't just affect a hypothetical future sale, it changes the entire negotiating position TNA is in right now. If you're a potential buyer and you know WWE can just swoop in and match your offer, why would you even bother doing the due diligence?
That's a really good point. It basically chills the market for TNA.
Completely. And Jarrett's other big question, the one he kept coming back to, was what did Anthem, TNA's parent company, actually get out of agreeing to this? He said, and again I'm quoting directly, why would you do that? What did Anthem get out of giving them that clause?
And that's the part that's hard to answer, right? Because from the outside, it looks like Anthem handed WWE a massive amount of leverage.
It does. And to be fair, Jarrett himself said he wanted to play both sides of the conversation. He acknowledged there might be a rationale he's not seeing, but he couldn't land on one. And given that he co-founded TNA back in June 2002 with his father Jerry, he has a pretty deep understanding of how these kinds of deals can play out.
Although it's worth noting, and this is relevant context, Jarrett is currently persona non grata with Anthem due to past legal issues. So he's not exactly an unbiased observer here.
That's a fair point to raise. His perspective comes with that caveat. But the concern he's raising isn't really about him. It's a structural question about the deal itself, and it's one that other people in the industry are also asking.
Right. So let's talk about the history here, because this isn't the first time WWE has had this kind of arrangement with another promotion.
This is where it gets really interesting. According to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, the arrangement WWE reportedly has with TNA is similar to deals WWE previously had with several European independent promotions, specifically WXW, Over the Top Wrestling, and Progress Wrestling.
And what did those deals look like?
The structure was those promotions got to have WWE talent appear at their events, WWE got content for the WWE network, and WWE retained an option to acquire those companies. So it was framed as a content and talent exchange deal, but the acquisition option was baked in.
And Revolution Pro Wrestling was offered the same deal and said no.
RevPro declined it, which in hindsight looks like a pretty significant decision, because the most instructive case of what can happen when you do accept that kind of deal is Evolve. WWE acquired Evolve under a similar arrangement, shut it down, and then later relaunched it as a WWE brand.
So Evolve went from being an independent promotion to being absorbed and then repackaged under the WWE umbrella.
Exactly. And that's the precedent that makes Jarrett's concern feel less like speculation and more like pattern recognition. He's seen this movie before, even if the scale is different.
And TNA is a much bigger entity than Evolve was. We're talking about a promotion with a 24-year history, an AMC television deal, and according to one report, a valuation somewhere between $30 and $50 million.
Right. According to the Web is Jericho report, Anthem would reportedly accept $30 million for TNA, but is hoping to get as much as $50 million, partly because of that AMC television deal. So there's real money on the table here.
Which makes the clause even more significant. If WWE can match any offer up to $50 million, they're essentially the only buyer that matters.
That's the math. And Dave Meltzer weighed in on this too, speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio. He was careful to say the clause doesn't guarantee a sale. He pointed out that similar options existed with those British promotions, and WWE never actually acquired most of them. But he also made a point that I think is really underappreciated.
What was that?
Meltzer argued that history shows promotions working closely with WWE can struggle to establish their own stars once WWE talent stops appearing. So even if WWE never buys TNA, the partnership itself might be quietly hollowing out TNA's ability to build its own identity.
That's a really uncomfortable idea. Like, the partnership is the problem, even if the acquisition never happens.
Exactly. Because if your biggest storylines and your biggest moments are built around WWE talent crossing over, what happens to your homegrown stars? Who are the TNA names that fans are going to remember from this era?
And that question gets even sharper when you look at what's been happening at TNA recently. There have been a lot of departures.
Yeah, this is the context that's driving a lot of the speculation. According to multiple reports, Tommy Dreamer, Sami Callihan, Tessa Blanchard, and Steve McLin have all departed TNA in recent weeks. That's a significant amount of talent leaving in a short window.
And when you have that kind of talent drain happening at the same time as reports about a buyout clause, people are going to connect those dots.
They are. And Jarrett on his podcast also made a broader point about the wrestling business that I think is worth sitting with. He said the business is in desperate need of change in so many ways. He's been saying it since 2011 or 2012. And he raised this question. WWE's revenues are growing under Nick Khan, but are they actually growing the audience?
That's a distinction that matters a lot. Revenue and audience size aren't the same thing.
Right. And Jarrett's point was that in the current media landscape, where it's all about retention and streams rather than traditional ratings, the metrics are much harder to read. He called it a much cloudier picture, which is actually relevant to TNA's situation, because their value to a buyer depends a lot on how you measure their audience.
So TNA is trying to sell itself in a moment where the whole industry is still figuring out what the right barometers even are.
Exactly. And that uncertainty probably makes the right of first refusal clause even more valuable to WWE. They don't have to rush. They can watch how TNA's AMC deal performs, see how the audience numbers develop, and then decide whether to exercise the option.
It's a very patient kind of leverage.
Very patient. And Meltzer noted that any decision to actually acquire TNA would ultimately rest with WWE President Nick Khan. So this isn't something that's happening automatically. It's a strategic option that someone has to actively choose to exercise.
Let me push back on something, though. Is it possible that Anthem got something real out of this deal that we're not fully accounting for? Like, the AMC television deal, the WrestleMania moment for Joe Hendry, those aren't nothing.
That's a legitimate counterpoint. And it's actually the question Jarrett himself said he wanted to explore. He said, let's play both sides of this. The exposure TNA has gotten from the partnership is real. Joe Hendry at WrestleMania 41 is a moment that would not have happened without the WWE relationship. Jordan Grace working in WWE's women's division, that's visibility TNA couldn't have bought.
So maybe Anthem's calculation was, we trade some long-term leverage for short-term legitimacy and exposure.
That might be exactly it. And if Anthem was already thinking about an eventual sale, having a high-profile partnership with WWE on the books actually makes TNA more attractive to buyers, including WWE itself. So the clause might have been the price of admission for a deal that made TNA more valuable overall.
That's actually a more charitable read than Jarrett's.
It is, but here's the thing. Even if that's the rationale, it doesn't resolve Jarrett's core concern. Because the clause still means that if someone like, say, former UFC owner Lorenzo Fertitta, who has reportedly been mentioned as a potential buyer, came in with a serious offer, WWE could just match it. Fertitta's interest has been reported, but no deal is finalized.
Wait, Lorenzo Fertitta? The UFC guy?
Yeah, according to Wrestling Arena News, his name has come up in industry rumors as a potential buyer. But sources also noted that any prospective buyer would likely seek a collaborative, non-adversarial relationship with WWE rather than direct competition. Which tells you something about how dominant WWE's position is right now.
So even a buyer with serious resources would be coming in trying to work with WWE, not against them.
Right. And that's the broader picture here. WWE's position in American professional wrestling is so dominant that even potential competitors are thinking about how to coexist with them, not how to challenge them. The right of first refusal clause is almost just the legal formalization of a power dynamic that already exists.
That's a pretty sobering way to frame it.
And it's worth remembering that none of this is confirmed. Jarrett himself said he's not 100% sure the clause is real. The Wrestling Observer newsletter reported it, Dave Meltzer discussed it, but neither TNA nor WWE has officially confirmed the terms of their partnership agreement.
So we're working with reported information, not confirmed facts.
Exactly. Which is actually part of what makes Jarrett's reaction interesting. He's responding to a report he can't verify, but the fact that he finds it plausible says something about how these kinds of deals have worked historically.
And the Evolve precedent is the thing that makes it plausible, because that's not a rumor, that actually happened.
Exactly. WWE acquired Evolve, shut it down, and relaunched it as a WWE brand. That's the full arc. And RevPro looked at that kind of deal and said no. So there are promotions that have seen this playbook and chosen not to participate.
Which raises the question, did TNA have the leverage to say no? Or was the partnership too good to pass up?
That's probably the most honest question in this whole conversation. TNA needed the exposure. The AMC deal, the WrestleMania moments, the NXT crossovers, those things matter for a promotion trying to stay relevant. The question is whether the price of that relevance was too high.
And TNA is heading into Slammiversary, their biggest summer event, with all of this hanging over them.
Right. And reportedly, a number of new names are expected to be in attendance at Slammiversary. So TNA is still operating, still putting on shows, still trying to build momentum. But the backdrop of all this speculation about the clause and the departures is hard to ignore.
So when you step back from all of this, the clause, the history, the departures, Jarrett's alarm, what does it actually add up to?
Here's what I think it comes down to. The WWE TNA partnership has been genuinely beneficial for TNA in terms of visibility. Joe Hendry at WrestleMania, the AMC deal, the extended partnership through 2028, those are real wins. But if the right of first refusal clause is real, TNA may have traded a piece of its future independence for those wins. And the Evolve precedent shows that's not a hypothetical risk, it's a documented outcome.
And Meltzer's point about star making is the slow burn version of the same problem. Even if WWE never buys TNA, if TNA can't build its own stars because the biggest moments are always tied to WWE talent, the promotion hollows out from the inside.
That's the quiet danger. And Jarrett's broader point about the wrestling business needing change, about the metrics shifting from ratings to retention and streams, that's the environment TNA is trying to navigate while all of this is happening. It's a lot of pressure on a promotion that's already dealing with significant talent departures.
So for fans watching this situation, what should they actually be paying attention to?
Watch whether TNA is building stars that feel distinctly TNA, names that fans care about because of what they've done in that promotion, not because of their WWE connection. And watch whether Anthem makes any moves that suggest they're actively looking for a sale. Right now, it's unclear whether TNA or Anthem is actually looking to sell. But the clause, if real, means that conversation could happen faster than anyone expects.
And the fact that Jarrett, someone who built TNA from the ground up, is the one saying the writing is on the wall carries a certain weight.
It does, even with the caveat that he's not on good terms with Anthem. His read on how these structural deals play out comes from decades of experience in this industry. And his question, what did Anthem actually get out of this clause, is one that nobody has answered yet.
And maybe that's the most important unanswered question in all of this.
Because if there's a good answer to it, if Anthem got something substantial that we're not seeing, then the deal makes sense and TNA's independence is more secure than it looks. But if there isn't a good answer, then Jarrett's superglue metaphor might be exactly right.
Superglue. Permanent, invisible until it sets, and very hard to undo.
That's the thing about right of first refusal clauses. They don't announce themselves. They just sit there, quietly shaping every decision around them until the moment they matter.
That's a really good way to put it. And it's a reminder that in the business of professional wrestling, just like in any business, the most consequential decisions often aren't the ones made in the ring. They're the ones made in the contract.
Exactly. The storylines play out on TV, but the real story is in the fine print.
And with that, thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts. Jeff Jarrett said the writing is on the wall and it's in superglue, whether that